right here. This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking live at Launch Pad 0A at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport on Wallops Island, Virginia. This view of Northrop Grumman's Antares rocket, poised on top of the pad, towering 133 feet tall, fully fueled, ready to launch over 8,000 pounds of research, fresh food, technology demonstrations, and supplies to the International Space Station. This is Northrop Grumman's CRS-17 mission, and liftoff is set for 11:40 and 3 seconds a.m. Central Time, 12:40 and 3 seconds p.m. Eastern Time at the start of a 5-minute launch window today. The first stage is already loaded with its fuel to launch into space, liquid oxygen, and RP-1 kerosene. The second stage of Antares is a solid rocket motor.
LC Prop 2, HSS ASC is paused.
The weather conditions for today's launch are looking good. It's currently 45 degrees and partly cloudy with winds at about 18 miles per hour.
80-21 now.
Teams all across the United States are supporting today's NG-17 launch. At the Wallops Flight Facility in Wallops, Virginia, which you see on your screen here, Northrop Grumman engineers are monitoring today's countdown from the Range Control Center.
Copy that. Lead Prop 2, you can resume.
They'll be counting down and walking us through the next 23 minutes until launch. And they'll be in the control room from the point of liftoff to when the Cygnus resupply craft separates from the vehicle's second stage.
Complete all steps through step 385. Hops 1, step 2.
Just moments ago, a poll was conducted of the engineering systems, and everything is currently a go for launch. Also supporting today's cargo resupply mission is the team in Dulles, Virginia. Here, another team of Northrop Grumman engineers are standing by, ready to take over the flight of Cygnus after spacecraft separation occurs.
And Marshall, I'll wait for your call back when 388 is complete. Copy.
The destination for Cygnus following launch today and a 2-day orbit is the International Space Station. Teams in Mission Control Houston are also monitoring the operations of the space station and watching today's launch.
Roger that. We'll check 389 complete.
The flight director during this Orbit 2 shift is Judd Freeling.
Stage 1, LC, countdown 1.
Go ahead, LC.
Yeah, provide status of cold helium bottle supply pressure.
Yeah, we're still monitoring LC. We'll make a call between now and L-16 minutes.
The crew on board the International Space Station is enjoying their weekend with a day off involved with cleaning and exercising. There are currently 7 human beings and working aboard the International Space Station as part of Expedition 66. From left to right, they are NASA astronaut Raj Achari and Tom Marshburn, European Space Agency astronaut Matthias Maurer, Roscosmos cosmonauts Anton Shkaplerov and Pyotr Dubrov, and NASA astronauts Kayla Barron and Mark Vande Hei. Vande Hei is in the midst of a record-breaking spaceflight in which he will become the American with the longest single spaceflight. He's on his way to surpassing Christina Koch's 328-day mission, which he'll break on March 3rd, and on March 15th, he'll break Scott Kelly's record of 340 days in space. When Vande Hei returns to Earth on March 30th, he will have spent a record-breaking 355 consecutive days in orbit. We're T-minus 20 minutes and counting until today's launch. No issues being worked by the flight control team at Wallops. It is a tradition for each Cygnus vehicle to be named after a significant space explorer who contributed to human space exploration. Today's Cygnus being launched is named the SS Piers Sellers after late NASA astronaut and climate scientist Piers Sellers. Piers Sellers began his career at NASA in 1982 and flew 3 times on the Space Shuttle aboard STS-112, STS-121, and STS-132. In total, Piers Sellers spent nearly 35 days in space, and as an astronaut, he helped build the International Space Station over the course of 6 spacewalks totaling 41 hours. We're T-minus 19 minutes and counting to today's launch. No issues being worked by the flight control team at Wallops. And joining us today is a special guest from Northrop Grumman to discuss today's launch. Christina Haloma is the Antares Systems Engineering Program Manager. Christina, welcome.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm excited to be here, and I'd just like to welcome all of you watching here in the United States and around the world to see a successful Antares launch and Cygnus mission to the International Space Station.
We're getting a look at the pad now of the Antares rocket. Christina, can you tell us some of the milestones we can look forward to ahead of today's launch?
Yes, so Sandra, there's still quite a few pre-launch milestones that are left here right before we launch. For example, we are currently at the tail end of the propellant loading operations. When that is complete, the team will top off the propellant and do some fuel adjustments. And then we'll do a final go, no-go poll that will be completed to proceed to final countdown here before launch. And then at approximately 3 minutes before we launch, the auto sequence will be initiated. That is where Antares' internal flight computers take over and commands the vehicle. So the auto sequencer then goes through the final steps of prepping the vehicle for launch and will proceed through the final countdown. But after liftoff, our team will be also monitor some post-launch milestones. The first milestone will be us waiting for the main engines to burn, and that'll happen for approximately 200 seconds until our main engine cutoff. And then once we get to the main engine cutoff, we'll go into a short coast right before we separate from stage 1 from stage 2, which we call the upper stack portion of Antares. After that, we'll continue to coast a little bit, and then about 30 seconds before starting that separation, and then we'll have an internal separation where the stage 2 flies out of the external upper stack. Once stage 2 is clear of the upper stack, the stage 2 will ignite for about 2.5 minute burn that puts Cygnus real close to their orbit, and then it'll coast and ensure everything is stable, and then Cygnus will be released into the desired orbit. And then after Cygnus is released, they'll go through their own comm checks, and then about an hour or hour and a half after we separate, Cygnus will then release its solar arrays and be on its way to the International Space Station. So all in all, from launch until Cygnus gets to its orbit is approximately 9 minutes. So it'll be fun to watch here post-launch.
It sure will. And Christina, this Cygnus mission is unique in that it has reboost capability. Can you discuss the Cygnus reboost capability planned during this mission?
Yes, so Sandra, in addition to delivering more than the 8,000 pounds of critical cargo to the astronauts living on the ISS, the Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft will perform its first operational ISS reboost. Reboosting is a critical part of altitude maintenance for the International Space Station. What happens is the Earth's atmosphere causes a slight amount of drag, causing the station orbit to decay over time. So Northrop Grumman will perform the adjustment service while Cygnus is actually berthed with the station. So small, precise nudges are required to place the ISS back into its proper orbit. And Northrop Grumman is very proud to offer this standard service to NASA.
Today's operation.
Thank you very much, Christina. Christina Haloma with us today by phone.
And GNC1 LC.
Go ahead, LC.
Yeah, step 405, provide status trajectory file for launch operation.
Now inside 15 minutes until launch, everything continues to proceed on track for today's liftoff scheduled at 11:40 and 3 seconds Central Time, 12:40 and 3 seconds Eastern Time.
LC, Core 1 on countdown 1.
Go ahead, Core 1.
So I've got step 397 for you. Fuel level adjustment is not required.
Copy that. Check 397 complete. And Prop 2, step 398 is go for ARM OCCS for no adjustment to fuel level.
LC, Prop 2, it's in work. And OCCS.
At this hour, propellant loading is now complete. Everything continues to be green across the board at Wallops. The weather's looking good. Everything all set for Antares to begin its flight to deliver the Cygnus resupply vehicle to its preliminary orbit, now less than 14 minutes from now.
Step 401 is not required. Step 406, not required. Step 407, not required. And launch team will be coming up on our pole to proceed with final countdown in a little bit over a minute. And CMD, I'll wait for your call on step 408.
Step 411, vacuum verified.
Copy that, MES1. We can check steps 410 and 411.
At that point, Chari will turn over the robotic movements to a team of ground controllers here in Houston, who will maneuver Cygnus into an installation position to be bolted into place on the Earth-facing side of the Unity module. Cygnus will remain at the space station until May, where it will depart the space station and burn up harmlessly in the Earth's atmosphere. Our capture coverage is scheduled at 3:35 a.m. Central Time, 4:45 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday.
Ops 1 LC, countdown 1, step 412, you're going to enable ACS VDMs.
ACS VDMs, internal power on.
Copy.
ACS VDMs enabled, voltage nominal, ODM commands clear.
Roger that, Elect 1, we can check steps 412 and 413. Launch team, be advised, step 414 is not required.
Now under 9 minutes until today's launch, everything's still looking good. And Antares has been switched to internal power. At about 3 minutes ahead of launch will be when the auto sequence handoff to terminal count occurs, and the computers will take over for the final steps to get us to launch at the opening of today's launch window.
GN2 conditioning initiated.
Copy that. Check 415 complete.
Inside 7.5 minutes until today's launch, you'll continue to hear some of these countdown milestones ahead of today's launch. And at the time of launch, the International Space Station will be flying 261 statute miles over northern Algeria, just south of the Mediterranean Sea.
And passing T-minus 7 minutes. Ops 2 LC, step 417. You go to initialize ground ordnance power supplies.
Ground ordnance power supplies initialized.
LC top lead, step 416, GTSO activation verified.
Copy lead, copy Ops 2.
Ground ordnance power supplies nominal.
Roger that, elect 1 will check 416, 417, and 48.
Coming up on the T-minus 6 minute mark.
Half Bay ECS transfer to GN2 is confirmed.
Roger that, site control, check 419 complete.
Now coming up on the T-minus 5 minute mark.
T-minus 5 minutes, Ops 2, step 420, initiate engine priming.
Engine priming started.
Ops 1, transfer avionics to internal power.
LC Ops 1, avionics internal power on. Stand by. External power off.
Copy that, check 420, 421.
Internal power nominal.
Roger, elect 1, check 422, and Ops 1, open FTS umbi loop.
FTS umbi loop open and green.
FTOU and FTS receiver indications are nominal.
Roger, elect 2, check 423, 424. Ops, send all arm command.
On my mark, 3, 2, 1, mark. All arm command sent.
SAs, ODMs, all arms.
Copy all. NASA TD, report range status.
LC priming verified.
CD is range is green.
Copy, range green. Copy, priming has been verified. Check 427 and 428. And launch team be advised, phase 3 dynamic limits will be active at T-minus 3 minutes.
T-minus 3 minutes and 30 seconds until launch. Everything's still green across the board.
FC command into flight mode.
T-minus 3 minutes.
Auto sequence ODM bus voltages increase.
Less than 3 minutes until launch.
GNC1, verify ready for nav mode.
LC GNC1, OrbNav ready for nav.
And Ops 2, step 435, switch to nav.
LC Ops 2, switch nav.
All aboard! OrbNav telemetry verified.
Copy that. GNC1, check 436 and passing T-minus 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Coming up on the T-minus 2 minute mark, Antares systems in good shape. There are no issues at this time.
T-minus 2 minutes.
Just about done, honey.
T-minus 1 minute, 30 seconds.
90 seconds until launch.
T-minus 1 minute.
Less than 1 minute until today's launch. At 40 seconds, tanks will be pressurized.
T-minus 30 seconds.
T-minus 15 seconds.
T-minus 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have engine ignition.
Yep.
And
the Antares launch vehicle from Wallops Flight Facility. Engines are at 100% thrust. Speed is nominal.
And we have liftoff of the SS Piers Sellers, carrying over 8,000 pounds of cargo to the International Space Station. Good performance on the first stage so far.
Steady at 100% thrust and nominal. Engine still at 100% thrust and nominal. Valve VNO3 open. Attitude remains nominal. Electrical power is nominal.
Everything continuing to look good on Antares.
Passing through 25,000 feet. Passing through max Q, attitude remains nominal.
The first stage is now passing through max Q, the area of maximum dynamic pressure on the rocket. Now 90 seconds into today's flight of the Northrop Grumman Cygnus resupply cargo craft headed to the International Space Station.
NG-3 now open. Engines remain steady at 100% thrust.
Coming up on the 2-minute mark of flight, everything looking good.
Attitude remains nominal. Power is nominal. Seven 7,000 feet per second velocity. Attitude remains nominal. Attitude remains nominal.
Continuing to get good reports from the Range Control Center at Wallops.
Velocity now 11,000 feet per second. Power remains nominal. Beginning slow throttle down. Core pressures remain nominal.
Now 3 minutes into today's flight, throttle down will occur 3 minutes into the flight, which means main engine cutoff will be coming soon.
Engine's now at 55% thrust. And MECO.
We have MECO, or main engine cutoff. Antares now entering a coast stage. Fairing separation will occur about 30 seconds from now.
Stage 1 Delta V. Stage 1 is separated.
And as we lose sight of the vehicle, switching to our animation, there are some controlled firings of the inner stage of the rocket, everything continuing to perform as expected.
Stage 2 ignition at 246. And the vehicle remains at nominal attitude. We have fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirms. Cygnus now exposed to the atmosphere as it continues its trek uphill to its preliminary orbit.
Stage 2 ignition.
Stage 2 ignition confirmed.
Stage 2 remains nominal.
Stage 2 is a solid rocket motor burn for about 2 minutes and 44 seconds.
TVC is nominal and power is nominal. TVC is nominal.
Continuing to hear all good calls now 4 minutes into today's flight.
Stage 2 performance remains nominal. TVC and attitude are nominal. Approximately 100 seconds to burnout. Vehicle attitude remains nominal. TVC power and attitude remain nominal. Stage 2 remains nominal. TVC is nominal. Stage 2 remains nominal. Stage 2 motor pressure starting to tail off. Vehicle attitude remains nominal. And we have stage 2 burnout.
Stage 2 burnout confirmed. Cygnus has reached the preliminary orbital insertion. The next major event will be Cygnus's
Attitude remains nominal.
separation from the second stage, which will occur at about the 8-minute 51-second mark.
Antares is in orbit and will close for roughly 100 seconds prior to payload separation.
Everything still performing as expected, now 7 minutes into today's launch.
Vehicle power and attitude remain nominal. Antares remains nominal. Approximately 30 seconds to payload separation. Latitude remains nominal, power nominal. And we have payload separation.
Spacecraft separation confirmed. Cygnus now well on its way to the International Space Station.
Well maneuver. And stage 2 attitude is nominal.
Can see the excitement in the room there as some celebratory fist bumps and high fives take place following today's successful launch.
And Prop 1 LC, countdown 1. Can you verify helium pulse purging is in progress? Copy that. And Prop 2, can you verify HPGN2 supply line post-launch purging?
LC Prop 2, GN2 line pulse purging is in progress.
Copy that. And GNC1, let me know when you've provided the state vector to Cygnus, and we'll look for confirmation from them.
LC GNC1 in work.
Site control, step 449, can you remove aft bay GN2 flow and reconfigure ECS for post-launch?
Aft bay GN2 flow is off, ECS reconfigured for post-flight.
We had a successful launch of the Cygnus cargo vehicle, launching at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time today. With it, over 8,000 pounds of food, fuel, and supplies headed to the International Space Station.
Arm enable rotated and arm indication no longer illuminated.
And Ops 1, disable your local launch enable button.
Ops 1, launch enable removed.
And GSO, can you disable your local launch enable button?
And once Cygnus arrives to the International Space Station in the early hours Monday morning, it will be grappled and installed and then bolted into place. Following that, a series of leak checks at the berthing interface between Cygnus and the Unity module will be conducted to make sure that there's a tight seal between the Cygnus and the station. Following that, the process of hatch opening will begin.
Ground lock, external power off.
Copy that. And TLM, it looks like we're LOS at this time.
A firm, LC.
Okay, TLM, you can stop telemetry archiving at the DCOM. You can stop MCC telemetry display server distributor logging, and you can stop the G2 telemetry recording.
LC TLM and work will report when complete.
And if you're just joining us, the Northrop Grumman Antares rocket lifted off on time from the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia from Launch Pad 0A at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up in a few hours will be solar array deploy. We won't be covering solar array deployment live on air, but we will provide updates via our blog and social media. Again, it was a perfect ride to orbit. Cygnus now well on its way to the International Space Station with 8,300 pounds of food, fuel, and supplies on board. This is Mission Control Houston. Cygnus now safely in orbit heading to the International Space Station. We had a smooth launch from the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia, and now joining us via phone is International Space Station Operations Manager Dina Cantella. Dina, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a beautiful launch. How can you hear me?
Thanks so much for joining us today, Dina. Now, with a successful launch and Cygnus on orbit, what's ahead of the operation? What's ahead for the operation teams?
Well, it was a beautiful launch. How do you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Well, so ahead of the operations team, the Cygnus will perform a rendezvous with ISS, and when it gets close enough on Monday, the crew will use the Canadian robotic arm to grapple Cygnus, and then we'll attach it to ISS. And Raja's primed to operate the arm with Kayla backing him up. And those joint operations are planned to start around 11 p.m. Sunday night in Houston, the joint operations being between ISS and the Northrop team. And then that capture of the Cygnus vehicle is targeted for around 3:35 a.m. Central Time. So after that capture, the ground team will take over control of the arm to berth Cygnus to the Unity Mater port. And that's the port that faces Earth. And we can expect the crew to be able to get the hatch open that same day on Monday. And that'll be maybe around 11:20 a.m. Houston time, depending on how things are progressing with the onboard operations. And the crew might be able to start some cargo operations on Monday, but the bulk of the first critical transfers are expected to take place in earnest really starting on Tuesday. And then we're expecting to have Cygnus attached to ISS until the end of May. And we're really looking forward to having all this cargo get on board.
And Dina, can you tell us a little bit about just how important it is to have these regular cargo flights?
Well, as you can imagine, these flights are critical for supplying the science investigations that make the International Space Station the incredible research facility that it is. And of course, the cargo flights also provide supplies for the crew and critical maintenance items and hardware to make the changes necessary to ISS to support new science. And so just some examples here on this particular flight of research that's coming up. Some examples include investigations looking at the effects of a drug on cancer cells. We've got investigations on skin aging, plant growth. We're looking at new hydrogen sensors. And you know, this science provides direct benefits to those on Earth as well as for future human spaceflight crews and future spaceflight. So, you know, this flight also is delivering some important hardware, like another modification kit that'll continue our work to upgrade the solar arrays on board ISS, and some other key items that will be needed for a new capability that we're excited about to dispose trash items through the NanoRacks airlock to help with some of our logistics. So I just say regular cargo missions, there's the lifeblood, really, of ISS's supply chain to continue research, and especially as we're continuing to extend station operations through 2030.
Thanks, Dina. And is there anything in particular that is unique about this mission that you're most looking forward to?
Well, yeah, in fact, this Cygnus vehicle has been modified to provide a capability to reboost ISS. And so it just uses some of its propellant in the vehicle itself. And we've done a test prior to this with Cygnus, but this will be our first real use of the capability to actually reboost the station. And it gives us another way to do so in addition to the Russian thrusters or the Russian Progress cargo spacecraft capability. So it's great to be able to expand our capabilities this way.
Dina Cantella, the International Space Station Operations Manager, joining us today via phone. Thank you very much, Dina. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Again, we had a successful launch of Northrop Grumman's CRS-17 mission on time today at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time. To recap today's launch activities, the Northrop Grumman Antares rocket lifted off on time from the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia from Launch Pad 0A at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up in a few hours will be solar array deployment. We won't be covering solar array deployment live on air, but we will provide updates via our blog and social media. It was a very smooth ride to orbit, sending the Cygnus resupply vehicle to its preliminary orbit en route to a 2-day rendezvous that will result in Cygnus arriving to the International Space Station in the wee hours Monday morning. We'll be covering the capture of Cygnus, and our coverage will begin at 2 a.m. Central Time, 3 a.m. Eastern Time on NASA TV. NASA astronaut Rajachari will use the Canadarm2 to reach out and capture Cygnus at 3:35 a.m. Central Time, 4:35 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll then take a little pause, come back a couple of hours later for installation coverage, where Cygnus will be turned over to the robotic ground controllers here in Houston to install and bolt Cygnus into place on the Earth-facing port of the Unity module of the International Space Station. Our installation coverage will begin at 5 a.m. Central Time, 6 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday morning. With that, we'll wrap up our coverage of today's liftoff of the Antares rocket from Wallops to send Cygnus into its preliminary orbit. From all of us in Mission Control Houston,
Okay,